How's it going, guys? Here today to do a little instructional video for you. We have a S90V teal PM2 that I purchased recently, and we are going to do a little breakdown of this knife. We're going to take it apart and put it back together. This is something you just want to know if you're doing a scale swap or if you just taking it down for maintenance and want to see how it works. We're going to take it all the way down to just bare parts, and then we'll rebuild it. So first thing first, we want to do is you're going to get a mat. You're going to get a towel, something. This is a rubberized mat. These are pretty common. These are cheap. A lot of dealers give them away for free even. But get a mat is important. It'll keep your screws from rolling off the desk or you scratching a knife or whatever. It just keeps it stable. Second is you need a set of really good Torx drivers in T10, T8, and T6 for a PM2. Those sizes cover most knives. Some differences is the military uses a T15, but other than that, most Spydercos you can get away with these 3 screw sizes. On your Torx drivers, these are the most important tool in your knife maintenance arsenal, and I highly suggest using quality products. If you use things like Harbor Freight bits or things made in China, they have a high possibility of stripping out because they're not good quality. If you look on any group, if you ask any suggestions, you ask anybody, 95% of people are going to recommend Weehaw drivers. These are made in Germany. Some Weehaw drivers are made in Vietnam, but these specifically, this is the 36291 set of Torx drivers. It comes from T6 to T15. It's the soft touch driver, so it's got a nice cushioned handle, and it's made in Germany, so it's a good quality tip that won't twist out of shape. It's got a nice long throw to it, which I prefer for working on knives with a little bit of distance compared to working with the stubby ones, which I have around here somewhere. The stubby type of handles. This comes in a set for about $30 on Amazon or Weehaw's site. This is game changer though for me. Like this driver has taken apart hundreds of knives and it's still in great shape. I still use it. They're really good with these big cushion handles for breaking Loctite. Is probably the biggest reason I suggest these. Is you can really get some good torque on it, and because these have good quality teeth, you're not going to strip anything if you really sit there and crank. I've never had a screw I couldn't get out. So that's our most important tool. Bonus points, if this is not necessary but it's handy often, is the Nipex pliers wrench. This is a parallel jaw wrench with smooth jaws that are very narrow, that grabs things without marking up surfaces. So I use this for taking off the standoff posts when they spin. Sometimes standoffs get stuck and you have to, you can either use 2 T8s on opposite sides of the screw and try to crank it loose, or you can use a Nipex plier wrench and hold the standoff, which I'll demonstrate when we get started. So anyway, first things first, we're going to open our knife. We're going to put the presentation side up with the blade open. The reason that we're doing this with the blade open is the compression lock is a spring, and when it's in this closed position, it wants to shoot up. So we don't want this popping off. We want it down. So we're going to leave it so the spring is not compressed. First screw we're going to take off is this one on the presentation side. So you take your T8 and you're going to just check. You're going to break the Loctite like that, and you're going to check to see if it spins. This one comes out without the opposite side spinning the post, so we don't need the pliers wrench for this side. But for the other side, let's say the post is spinning, you're going to grab the post with the pliers wrench like this, taking your T8, cranking this side out, and you can literally just pull this post out and both the screws. Next screw is the stop pin screw in the front. Taking that screw out, it came out relatively easily. Now switching to the T10 driver, We're going to take our pivot screw out. If this has a lot of Loctite on it, you're really going to crank on it. You won't strip it if you use good quality tools, so it's very important to protect your babies and use good stuff. So we're going to crank this open, putting our screws to the side somewhere we're not going to lose them. Now we're going to open the knife. So we're going to take this and rotate it on the lanyard tube, pull it up, and when we're opening, we want to look for one thing right away, where this phosphorus bronze washer is. So we pull the blade out. There's a little washer on there. That's what keeps your knife smooth and lubricated and working right. It'll either be on the blade or it'll be on the back side of the liner. So it's important to pay attention to where it is when you take it off, because if it's on the liner and you just toss these to the side, there's a good chance you could lose it. So pay attention to your washers. If you do lose your washers or damage them, you can get new ones at Knives Plus. Great shop. They have good hardware, replacement parts, and all sorts of custom goodies. So we got the blade out. Now we're going to take off the clip using a T6. In the factory configuration, the way you get a PM2, it'll be tipped down like this, meaning the pivot screw will be covered up by the clip, so we always have to take the clip off if we're going to work on the knife. It's a silly design. It's funny that they still sip it tip down when 95% of people use a tip up, but that's what it is. So T6, put the clip off. Now we're going to take the stop pin out using a T8 and our pliers wrench. Because this one was spinning in place, so the easy way to do it is just use a pliers wrench. Pull the tube out. Last screw we're going to take out is the pivot screw on this side, on the clip side. Pivot comes out. There's a washer underneath it. If you have a problem getting the pivot out, if it's really stuck in there, a tip I use to get stuck pivots out is use your T6 because it's got a nice petite tip. Stick it in the hole and wiggle it around, and it'll pop right out. Take our washer, put it to the side. Now we are left with just the bones of the knife, right? So what we're going to do to get the lanyard tube out, so one side will be really easy, and we're just going to take these and we're going to go back and forth like this. We're all wiggling and going in and out gently like this until one side pops out. So this side popped out, leaving us with a tube just on one side. So now this is everyone's biggest fear, it seems like. How do we get this tube out without damaging the G10 or the tube? We don't want to put a screwdriver in there and mess around. We don't want to use a punch and knock it out. There's a tool that you can use, lanyard tube remover, but I prefer to use the screwdriver method. So you're going to take a screwdriver. You're going to lift up the liner, put the screwdriver between the blade or the liner and the scale, and you're going to pull down, and it'll start to create tension as it's starting to bend on the lanyard tube. And when you get to the bottom, using your fingers like this, you're going to pull until it pops out, like so. Sometimes it won't pop out right away on the first try, and I bend it back forward and then try again. So that's how you get a lanyard tube out. It comes out without fail. Sometimes it's a lot of pressure. That was relatively easy, but sometimes it really takes a lot to pop it out. But you are safe. You're not going to bend your liner. It's made of spring steel. It's meant to be bent, and it's meant to go back to the shape it was. Okay, to rebuild this knife, first thing we're going to do, clip side scale, clip side liner, the one with the little notch cut out in it. Set that down in here. Now we're going to take out our pivot and one washer. And we're going to look at the washer and look what side has been rubbing on the blade already. It should have like little circles and kind of burnished. This side, this is a brand new knife, so there's no side polished. So what we're going to do, though, for a little extra credit, is we're going to take our strop, take the washer. This is not necessary, but it helps. And we're just going to kind of go on the strop, rub it around for 10 seconds or so, shine it up, get any oxidization off the surface, just make it a clean surface. So now we have a shined up washer. And we're going to put that washer over the hole of the pivot with the shiny side up. Then we're going to take the pivot barrel, this little guy right here, and this pivot barrel is non-symmetrical, meaning one side has a notch in it that goes into a hole that matches the notch and keeps it from spinning in place. That's called a captured pivot. So what we're going to do is we're going to look on both sides of the pivot barrel, looking for its relatively subtle, but a flat spot that makes one side look like a D kind of. It's pretty small, but once you see it, you'll recognize it. We're going to take that side and we're going to put it into the flip side liner, and we're going to spin the pivot here until it pops in and goes down and sinks. Once it goes down and sinks, we're going to take our pivot screw, which is a T10, and screw it in. Nope, wrong screw. T10. And because the side is a captured pivot, it won't spin. And we're just going to tighten it down. And now the knife's held together. If you don't seat the pivot barrel correctly, if it's either the wrong side down or the D is not sitting sunken all the way in, you can still put the knife together, kind of. But you'll get to the end, everything will be jacked up. And if you look down inside the knife between the scales, you'll see that it's kind of flared apart. So if you have action problems, the first place to look is to see if you rebuilt it, if this pivot is sitting fully seated in the hole. Most important thing. Next up, we're going to take our stop pin. Put it in with the T8 screw. In this case, it'll start to spin kind of, so we're just going to get it as high as we can. Now we're going to take the other smaller standoff with the T8. And to get the smaller standoff on, I find it easier to put the screw through the hole with your thumb. With your thumb, hold the screw, and then take the pivot or the standoff and twist it on to the screw instead of twisting the screw into the standoff. It's a lot easier to line it up. All right. Next up, we're going to pop our lanyard tube in. And so sometimes these are easy, sometimes they're hard. They don't always work. Sometimes you have one that's a little bit too flared out and it's hard to get back in the G10. So without damaging anything, what we're going to do is put the tube in with our thumb, just kind of push and see, wiggle back and forth and see if it pops in place like it did. This one's been out before, so it popped in place relatively easily. If you do have problems getting that sunken in place, if it's just kind of stuck, with moderate pressure, you can use a rubber jawed clamp like this. Put it on there and squeeze the tube in until it pops in place. This time we didn't need it, but it's always a handy tool to have around. All right, next up, we're going to put a drop of knife pivot lube type product. I use Gunny Juice right here, or Gunny Glide. You don't want to put too much. If you put too much, it will squirt out the knife. So just put one drop on the washer. Now we're going to take our blade and we're going to set our blade in the knife with it in the open position. Next up, we are going to take the other washer and we are going to polish it as well on the strop. All right, we're going to take Gunny Glide again, put one drop on the pivot, right where the tube sticks out. Take our washer with the shiny side down, facing the blade. The blade side of the washer, the contact, is the side where you want to be smooth. The washers don't spin. They just contact on one face, and it's on the inside face that lets it move. All right, next up, we're going to take clip side liner, presentation side liner and lock insert, and we're going to try to pop it on the tube like this, which popped on pretty easy again. Rotate it over, close up the knife, and right now everything's lined up well. First screw we're going to put in as the pivot. T8 body screw. We'll go back and tighten it up once we get the knife together. And then the last body screw. Now we're going to close it. Take the clip, and we're going to switch the clip to tip up. So we're going to put it right here. Now using a T6 driver. Using a T6 driver, we're going to lightly screw this in place. You don't want to screw it all the way down right away because we're going to want to adjust where the clip sits before we crank it down all the way. Okay, and now we kind of just adjust it, make sure the clip's where we want it. Go through, tighten these clip screws. Now we're going to go through the knife and tighten all the screws up all the way. Using our pliers wrenches, we're going to hold this back stand off like so. Tighten these down. All right, now we have a built knife. So we have a complete PM2. That's it, right? Well, no, because now I want to flick it open. And it kind of flicks open, but it's not dropping shut. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to open it up. We're going to go to the pivot screw, and we're going to loosen the pivot screw on the presentation side the smallest amount you can. And you'll know what I mean by you can only twist this a little bit, and that's what you want to do, just the tiniest bit, and stop. And then you're going to test the action. It still doesn't work. Now we're going to flip it over to the clip side and do the same thing, keeping the screws the same on both sides. Just a little bit cracked open. It's getting a little bit better. It's getting a little better, but it's not quite there yet. This should be really easy to drop shut, but still have no side-to-side blade play. That's our goal. So we're going to loosen this pivot up a little bit more. And now we have it drop shut, and it works pretty well. If you do have issues backing out screws with the pivot to make it drop shut and it won't drop shut, what you want to do is you want to go to this screw right here, the stop pin screw, and loosen it a little bit. Sometimes if this is pushing too much pressure on the scales, it'll pull the pivot too tight so the blade can't move. So if you're really having problems, you want to go to this screw and just kind of crack it open a little bit, and it'll alleviate some of the pressure off the pivot. But basically that's it. We got a dialed in knife, PM2 and S90V, built, lubed, reassembled, and there you go, folks. It's not that hard. It's not that scary. Use good tools. Use a mat. Thanks very much. That was fun, and I'll see you on the next one.